This is Colin True, and if you think outdoor media might be broken, come join us over at The Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree, because this is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. Every Monday, join me, producer Dave, and our industry insider and consigliere Owen Comerford to dig into the weeds of the business of going outside. On Wednesday, we get a little more adventurous as accomplished outdoor journalist Justin Hausman and I talk about the latest headlines that come out of the outdoor adventure community. And Fridays are reserved for hot takes and special guests. There will also be parting shots and views expressed that you probably won't get from a corporate press release or a standard outdoor podcast. So join us on The Rock Fight, where we break down the outdoor industry by saying the quiet part out loud. It's an open discussion, and we'd love your feedback, so don't forget to bring your rocks, look for, and follow The Rock Fight on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Welcome to Open Container. I'm Doug Schnitzbahn. I'm a journalist, writer, and overall lover of the outdoors. I've fought wildfires, reported on national politics, published magazines, and I even once had to move an outhouse uphill by hand. Today, we're going to talk about the way we see conservation. For decades, the battle over conservation has taken place not out in the wild, but in the courtrooms. In court and in Congress, conservationists have been able to fight developers, international mining companies, logging operations, grazing, all of these uses of public lands that tend to degrade natural ecosystems. These industries have a lot of power and sway in Congress, and many Americans have grown to see land and its resources as something to be used, part of a massive economy. I am not naive enough to think that we do not need these resources. Thanks to visionary legislation, including NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, the Wilderness Act, the Migratory Bird Act, and more recently, the Omnibus Lands Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, the American conservation movement has been able to fight to preserve wild places and the species with whom we share this earth. These victories have saved the outdoors. I was lucky enough to work in the trenches in the conservation movement. In 2000, I was hired by a group that included the Sierra Club, the Wilderness Society, the Idaho Conservation League, and smaller groups like the Committee for Idaho's High Desert and the now defunct American Lands to document the geological, biological, and cultural wonders of the Oahe and Bruneau Canyon lands. We advocated for the creation of a national monument in the southwest corner of Idaho, where the state intersects with Oregon and Nevada. In a tough political climate, we were not able to get the monument created. Our efforts did result in some wilderness protection for the Oahe, which was created in a bipartisan effort. But the vast majority of this place is still vulnerable to bulldozers and dollar chasers. While few people have heard of the Oahe, it is the largest chunk of roadless land left in the lower 48. With soaring rhyolite cliffs and endless expanses of sagebrush that explode with the dawn chorus of migratory songbirds in the morning, it's truly a place where you can find space and silence and connect to the wild heart of the planet. It's also a place with an ancient heritage. The Bannock, Paiute, and Shoshone people lived here for countless generations and still use this land. Which brings us back to today's topic. The reality is the conservation movement has all too often been dominated by white voices. When it comes to arguing for reasons to protect public lands, we argue not for the value of the land itself, but for the use, the utility of the land. And even when we protect it from extractive industries, we still prioritize recreation or other scientific uses. The conservation movement has also been accused of being exclusionary, preserving places simply so the privileged can play in them. And there has been an uncomfortable reckoning among modern-day conservationists that some of our heroes, such as John Audubon and even John Muir, were outwardly racist. As the conservation movement evolves, it needs to acknowledge the problems of its past and expand into finding new voices, new thinking. People of color are our most vital conservationists. They are seeing conservation and wild places as something more than spaces for utility, but as sacred spaces. Places that connect us to our ancestors and ourselves. places that have a right to exist on their own. My guest today, Chad Brown, simply describes conservation as love. He should know, Chad is a champion of environmental justice for both people and wild places. A filmmaker and conservationist, he's a Navy combat vet and the founder of the nonprofit Soul River and Love is King. His films, including Blackwaters, Sickenik, and Inward, focused on voices that are not heard enough when it comes to conservation and the healing power of the wild. He has won numerous awards, including the African American Filmmaker Award of Merit. He is one of the hardest working, dedicated, and most energetic people I know in the outdoor space. His latest film, Unveiling Resilience, Echoes of Owyhee Canyonlands, follows a group of BIPOC leaders as they travel through and interact with this sacred space. It is a beautiful ode to new voices and ways of thinking in the wild. So let's open the container with Chad Brown. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of the hardest working people in the outdoor industry and a constant inspiration to me, Chad Brown. Chad, good to see you today with all your gear behind you there, ready to go.
Nice to see you too, Doug, man. Yeah.
So first thing I wanted to ask you and for you to kind of tell everyone is, how did your career evolve? How did you end up becoming a filmmaker?
My background in the creative space, basically, I went to school for design, photography, communication design, basically, and that launched me into the opportunity to working in different design firms and ad agencies throughout New York and also LA. And through both of those spheres of New York and LA, I not just started out as a designer, working as an art director, but also had quite a few projects that came across that allowed me to get my feet wet around commercials. And my first role, I remember when I was at Campbell Ewald West in LA, was working on a Tebow campaign. Now I'm starting to tell my age, but yeah, and it was me actually helping out and concepting storyboarding for TV, and also work with radio, and so that was where I started to cut my teeth, really into telling stories, using storyboard and bringing that storyboard, executing from it like an art director into the space of TV, film, basically, and so I spent quite a few time, in that space around commercials, uh, working with many different artists, everything from radio to voiceover artists, talent, and it definitely gave me a 360 exposure into that kind of space of production. And then that's when things started to kind of fall off for me a little bit. I definitely took a turn in my life because I'm a combat vet, and so that robbed me out of that creative space where I had to really focus on my mental health of the issues I was dealing with from combat, basically in the military. And then when I came out of that space of dealing with working through my mental health, that put me in a better position where I was really ready to get back into society. And doing that, that put me in a position to open up two organizations that I run. And then while I'm doing that, it also allowed me to start stepping more into my creative mindset, and what I found now, since everything, it's interesting because we grow in many different ways, right? How we do and what we do yesterday is a whole lot different when we have faced any type of resistance of life, adversity, etc. And that changes us in our minds, our perspectives, even as artists, creatives, and we approach things a lot differently. And so, that being said, um, what I went through I would say it changed me more into a social environmental conscience type of creative. And that really became my new call to action for myself, to start walking that path, and when I started embodying that, embracing everything, that it definitely opened up many opportunities where I start to see where now, like yesterday, I was in this space doing commercials and promoting cigarettes and beer, and that kind of stuff, and brand, and working with
Right.
brand companies and all that kind of stuff. But today, my new path and what I pursue is finding these really interesting stories that are hidden in our environment of nature, around many different diverse voices. And there's many different layers of storytelling within that space, that's pretty much kind of untapped, and that's where I started to really focus my time and energy, my creativity, into telling stories through film, and using that backdrop of storytelling that I've learned when I cut my teeth in LA, of around doing commercials. And so that same form of execution, like as an art director on the commercial set and working with storyboards, working with the director, I carry that kind of same kind of workflow into my films. And the only difference is that I'm not doing a 2.5, 3 minute spot. I'm doing a story that will span itself into a 20 to 45-minute story.
Sure.
And that just means I just have to provide more storyboards for that type of engagement. But that's kind of like my, that's how I got into filmmaking. And of course, not a big fan of a lot of things that you see that Hollywood puts out, and so I like to more live into that raw documentary type of space, just because I'm dealing with real people, not actors and actors, and being able to elevate and bring those stories to the bigger screen.
Sure. And you've gone into this in such full force that always impresses me. You were the founder of, besides the films, you're the founder of Soul River, which is an award-winning organization that brings youth out fishing. You're the founder of Love is King. And then how many independent films have you made at this point, and how many awards have you won with those films?
I have made around 6 films now.
Okay. Yeah.
and I have been. To be honest, I have not been counting the awards, but quite a few of my films has been winning many awards on an international level. And it went beyond what I expect. And so we won awards in Hong Kong, Australia, Japan. Uh, um, there's another, I can't think another there's another place in the Middle East area, but it's really amazing, the where these films are just popping up in many different film festivals and getting this kind of recognition. And I wish I had the opportunity to step into Australia or Japan or Hong Kong at these film festivals, because I would be really curious to see how that kind of storytelling lands with them, in their culture, basically. And so, that's really intrigues me. But it's pretty, it's pretty amazing to be able to get that kind of recognition and those awards. I don't do it for the awards, but they're definitely coming.
Oh,
you
they're
know.
important. Yeah, we need that kind of recognition, right? And I mean, I think one of the great things about all your films too is I think they delve into your experience too, finding healing in
Yeah.
wild places. And maybe you could tell people a bit about, what wild places mean to you and how they've been so influential in your own life, and then how that works into your own art and filmmaking.
Wild places means to me, it's a sacred place to me. It's kind of like, it's
Love
like
that.
me going to church, and I'm in an environmental space where nature is the pastor, and I take the front seat in nature and allow nature to basically, uh, illustrate the importance of my being and who I am in this world. Nature gives me a reflection of my path, and that path could be, and that could be from anyone, but that path is not always pretty and great, but it forces you to look at that, and it forces you to stare it down and reevaluate that, and when you can reevaluate that path, that's when we start to do the work on ourselves. And so nature allows me to be messy, and it allows me to be happy, and it allows me uh, to be thankful of where I'm at, it's a true blessing of when we are in nature, and become a witness to what's happening around us, um, and it's delicate, and it's so special to allow her to work through you, learning how to be able to sit in silence and to sit in space, wide open space in nature is a powerful, powerful position that I choose to take as much as I can. It's kind of like seating myself in a field of medicine, a medicine of joy, a medicine of love, a medicine of strength, that I can be able to dig deep and get recharged and be able to thrust forward and take charge, uh, even though I may not have it all together, or I may be operating full on duct tape, but it's okay, because the that's just kind of like the life process that we have to go through. Not everything is going to be perfect, but the most important thing is when you do that work on yourself, you build that kind of confidence to where you say, you know what, I may not have this and I may not have that, but I'm going to be okay moving forward. And I'm going to be okay, taking lead. I'm going to be okay to get up in the morning and move forward and do what I need to do, because I know that there is a higher source, which is that profound of what nature provides you, is going to support and provide and have your back moving forward, And so nature is like me going back to church. It's that's what it's like for me. It feeds my soul, it feeds my mind. It gives me a compass in how I need to operate and move. It's a beautiful relationship, that I personally have with nature, and everybody has many different styles of relationship, but that's my relationship with nature.
I love that. And I had some other questions for you, but I think you talking about nature as church really makes me want to hop right ahead and talk about, talk about your latest movie, Resilience Rising, Echoes of the Wahi Canyon Lands. And especially, I found this movie really powerful. And part of it is it feels like going to church because you combine you combine gospel music and these amazing quotes of Martin Luther King Jr. With images of BIPOC leaders out on the Owyhee River in the wilderness. One of the most striking moments for me is when the film just starts and Martin Luther King, we hear him giving the I Have a Dream speech, and he says
Yeah.
he's seen the promised land, and
Yeah.
you cut to these leaders looking out over the Owyhee Canyon lands.
Yes.
How
Yes.
important was it for you to merge those two things that many people might not think go together, wilderness and the civil rights movement and spirituality?
Mm. It was so important for me to try to find that transition of exploration, and so you have an older leader, you're like an elder, Dr. Martin Luther King, who has been making so many awesome waves moving forward throughout our historical of humanity. And then this transition comes into these young leaders that are embarking on this exploration. Martin Luther King embarked on this exploration of humanity and grappling with these societal issues that are coming in. And it's really about obtaining respect, obtaining dignity, obtaining just the equalness of us operating in one society to move forward in the act of love. And then you have these young leaders that are also embarking on this exploration and looking beyond into the land where this land, historically, it's been fighting over. It's bloodshed on this land. It's been taken away from indigenous communities, the voices, etc. And so that's a new exploration that we are now embarking on, is putting back what was once taken, right? And protecting what's important to protect. As we have done as man, we have done a damage to a lot of our land, dismantling things, etc. And a lot of us are now waking up. So that's that exploration of waking up. It's time to rise up and realize that we have this opportunity to um, put back. We have this opportunity to protect. We have this opportunity to step in and correct what needs to be corrected and put back in place for people, for our next generation, to be able to come up and be able to enjoy this kind of space. We have done enough damage already. And so, yes, it's a complicated landscape, with the Hawaii King. It's a definitely complicated landscape. There's many different stakeholders on many different levels, and some of those practices may be good, some of them may be bad to the environment, etc. And it's been a long, long fight. But, that's the whole part of this new exploration of these BIPOC leaders stepping into. It's time to, let's get in, explore. We may have to roll our sleeves up and get a little dirty here, but we need to put back, what's been taken, right?
Yeah.
We need to protect that. Yeah.
Let's take a step back for a moment, and maybe you can tell everyone, the impetus of you creating this movie and kind of the idea behind it and who's in it.
I've been to the Hawaii Canyonlands quite a few times, and I'm aware that the state of where the issues are trying to protect the Hawaii. And there's been many leaders before me from many different organizations, et cetera, that's been trying to establish a protection for the Hawaii Canyonlands. And so when I've through a couple partners, when they kind of basically gave my organization Love is King this opportunity to bring BIPOC leaders into this space, and undocumented, it's kind of like this is probably the first time of bringing an all BIPOC group into the Oahe Canyonlands on a 6-day river run trip, and so the whole purpose was to bring these leaders into the space and for them to become a witness to the many issues that are happening on this river in the Oahe Canyonlands, is to engage in conversations and learn from many different folks and guides, etc., and take that in instead of like challenging, become this witness and just embody what's happening. And then we can sit and have these conversations of ideas and our thought leading type of ideas of how we can find solutions to help work with this. And apparently it's a very complicated, landscape,
Sure.
but I believe that, through good, strong leadership, and open mind ideas and being unconventional, because I really believe that we have to be very unconventional and to approach this, we can find a way to protect the Oahe Canyonlands. Senator Ron Wyden has been raising the flag for a very long time, marching, trying to find the right solution and the right opportunity to protect the Oahe Canyonlands. And that's still have not yet came to the head of where we want to protect it, basically. And so this is kind of like a really awesome opportunity with the BIPOC leaders who are in this film and who have embarked on this, like, this awesome journey through the Owyhee River, becoming a witness to Owyhee Canyonlands, and learning this. This gives another support layer tied in, that's tandem with Senator Ron Wyden's campaign, basically. And these leaders now will be leading the charge with the Protected Owyhee Canyonlands campaign to help push this. The beauty about this is that, I think when we're talking about conservation and protecting spaces, wild spaces, or even, and learning about, like, mining, or farming, etc., that's a small space of the conservation space that lives and people live in. That's also a privilege mindset, top level education, but beyond that, in your common day to day of urban world, people don't even know who Hawaii is,
Yes,
and
yeah.
people.
Yeah, and that's something maybe I'd add for people who don't know. It's amazing. The Owyhee Canyonlands is an area that spans Oregon,
Yeah.
Idaho, and Nevada. It is the largest chunk of roadless land in the lower 48. It's an incredible place. It's where the
Yeah.
Yellowstone hotspot first erupted. It's these incredible rhyolite canyonlands. It's a place for migratory songbirds. It's an incredible chunk of land. There's an incredible history there of indigenous people,
Yes.
Bannock people. Most people don't know about it, right? And it's not
Yeah.
protected.
It is
So
not protected, and I think if we played the cards right and have the right alignment of organizations aligned with the work that I'm doing, that's going to give a really unique, different twist on this platform through these BIPOC leaders, because they are influencers themselves and they have their own outreach as well in their communities. And so what I'm saying is, this is an opportunity to collectively work together to create a diverse army. And
yes,
that diverse army, it spans not just in the conservation space, but it extends out of that conservation space into urban spaces, and those urban spaces starts to raise that awareness to all the issues that are happening. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know about this place. What can I do to support, or what I need to do, etc. And so this film, it tells the stories of these BIPOC leaders on this experience. It challenges the many different, the societal or social, stereotype norm. It raises the racism issues of history, and so you get you're listening and learning on many different levels. But the most important, we are, at the end of the day, elevating the importance of this space that's needed, which is grounds of sacredness. It is grounds of healing
yeah,
for all people, right? And so I think this film will be definitely a beacon, to people beyond the conservation space, to help raise that awareness and bring the Hawaii into new living rooms, basically. But yeah.
love it. Yeah, and I think that was part of what was so powerful for me too when I heard Martin Luther King talk about the Promised Land, and we see the Owyhee. Is that
Yeah.
the people who fought in the civil rights movement, you know, because of their work, new
Right.
people can go to the Owyhee now who couldn't have gone there probably in the '60s, right, without being
That's right.
scared. And
Absolutely.
that's something really powerful. Now, could you tell us a bit about some of the leaders? Or, I mean, there's several leaders, but who are the people you chose, and tell us specifically some of the people who were featured in the movie. I found them
Yeah.
also great to listen to in it.
Yeah, I try to go down the list. One of the leaders comes to mind is Dr. Lisa Collins. She's an amazing woman. I really enjoy holding space with this woman every time I see her. She's just an amazing woman. Her background is centered around racial injustices, around the psychological generation of what things has happened, and she has this beautiful way of breaking those things down and being able to look at them, help people find healing through that process and build them back up. She's a really deep woman, and it was really a blessing to have her there. She does a lot of work with the National Park Service as well, and she's been pretty much every time I do a trip, she's the first one to join. She's always there with me. We have a gentleman by the name of Michael Crenshaw. He's a really interesting guy. He has a deep love for protecting the public lands, period. Deep love is protecting nature. But he does not look the part. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty that I embrace, because I like the fact that, because there is this kind of mindset that you have to dress this way and look this
Yeah.
way, to fit this outdoor, I don't know what you call it, uniform, whatever, and he comes into wild spaces as himself. He's a hip hop artist. And just by me saying hip hop artist, and by default, what does that look like? With the hat to the back and all that, he comes into that space like that, and that's how he moves through the outdoors, and he has a phenomenal following. He's been around in the business for decades, and he's a very well established hip hopper. His music is played all the way, all over the world, and you'll find a lot of his music on NPR. He's a social justice and also an environmental justice hip hop artist, and he does amazing work. And he definitely has a really unique lens when it comes to climate change conversations and protecting public lands. His lens is really unique, and it's very, what he says is very important. He would have you go into a deep thought, he's a
Sure.
he's a really awesome guy.
I'd say, it's great. I mean, I'd say hip hop's arguably the greatest cultural movement of our whole generation, right? So why shouldn't hip hop include wilderness? Why shouldn't it include conservation, right? What barriers should there be there that say that, right? Hip hop is not about one thing, right? So
Exactly. Hip hop is definitely a big historical cultural movement. It's part of the fabric of America now. It really is. It's part of that fabric, and it's definitely um, it definitely intersects in the political space, the conservation space, the social space, the justice, the injustices. It's just it's another map in how we can raise awareness and of the consciousness, and use hip hop to help basically make change happen as well. I think it's sad if someone want to turn their back on hip hop culture. It's I would say, like, you really need to slow down a little bit and think about what you're about to do, because hip hop culture is so powerful, and it has been again a compass into how our nation is driven, even from the top of the hill of Capitol Hill politics down to the streets. It's very, very powerful, very powerful.
And globally, right? I mean, I go to Norway and there's these, white Norwegian kids who are rapping or hip hop influenced, right? And and I think
Exactly.
on the other end too, I think what you said before was, maybe if there's, a hip hop icon out there in wild spaces, maybe some people who live in urban spaces who never thought before that conservation was part of their story, that wild places were part of their story, maybe they'll be made more aware to that. And as you said, see that injustice, the story of injustice follows through to this land as well. I mean, in the film, there's a really powerful spot, I think, where you cut just for a moment to chained feet, and then cut back to the wilderness. And that was a really amazing cut in the film for me too, and powerful, where you can tell that injustice is part of this story.
Yes, absolutely. it's another form of the way I look at it in fighting the injustices and balancing out in a natural environment to where it's fitting. That the beauty is that it gives another voice and another opportunity to speak to younger generations, speak to mainstream. Basically, that's that's a code, that's a communication that may not land with me, but it can land with others, basically, and that's creating diversity opportunity, right? That's showing diversity in a really unique, special way, in a very artistic way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that comes through too. In a lot of your films too. I think what you're doing is you're focusing on stories from people of color. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the white mainstream culture wants these stories to be, but we're going to get stories of how
Right.
a
Yeah.
black man sees the wilderness, right? Or how a black man sees conservation.
That's right.
And
That's
that
right.
brings in really important new perspectives. And
Yeah.
one of the most important ones I saw in this film was conservationists talking about saving a place simply because that land is sacred, because
That's
that
right.
land's holy, because that land brings you closer to God, right? And I think that's a conversation about conservation that we should have
Yeah.
on a national level as well, where a
We
lot
should
of
be now.
yeah, a lot of white conservationists just want to talk about utility of land. It's good for recreation, it's good for
Right.
medicine, it's good for money, right? I
Yep.
love the
Right.
idea that we can have new voices talking about conservation for people who've been left out before, as well as for the sacredness of the land itself.
Yeah. Let's bring the soul back. Let's bring that back. Let's start having some heart to heart conversations. I think when we can open that up and get people to see that it's not that utilitarian how it's always been. It's there's some soul in this land that we need to protect. We can all benefit from this. This is a sacred land. This is sacred grounds. And being able to have diverse voices to be able to speak to that, the importance of protecting the Oahe it's critical. The strategy in telling, in the storytelling that I do, having one voice and one experience could be challenged, but having 5 to 8 and being able to collectively come together of many different thought leaders can't be challenged. It can only be listened to. And it can only be listened to a point where it starts to educate and make you ponder, and makes you think differently. Or you may need to go do more research and go deeper, but it's non-threatening at the same time.
Sure.
And so when you have one voice up there, it's kind of like preacher to the choir, basically. And that can be intimidating. That could be threatening. But when you have a collective of diverse voices coming together in a collective thought process of leadership and talking about the most important thing that means to us, which is supporting, protecting, and loving nature, etc., it does starts to become a wave of information that can basically lace over many, many, many different people. And it would educate people at the same time. It doesn't become a back and forth, type of challenging questions and everything. It becomes more of like, wow, okay, because how can you challenge 7, 8, 9 different diverse voices, right?
Yeah.
It can only make you want to learn and want to know more if you don't know, and so I think that's just my way as a director is like coming up under the layers of the things in our society that makes us cringe. Well, I'm going to come up underneath that with love, and
Yeah.
this is how I'm going to execute love and inject love into, and you have no idea I'm injecting love back at you. But I'm using this heart of love and the elevation of many leaders, and love is not something that's always going to hug you, but it's also going to wake you up. It's
Yeah.
also going to make you think. These are gifts that's coming in, on many different levels, whether you're prepared or not prepared, but it's coming at you and it's going to embrace you with love, period. And that's I feel like that's really powerful. That's just kind of my way of giving back through storytelling, basically. But yeah.
Well, and you also, I mean, it makes me think, of course, of your organization, Love is King,
Yeah,
and that's, I think that's your driving
it
force in all
is.
you do, right? I mean, that's
That's
all
right.
you do is what you just explained to me. But maybe you can talk a bit about what Love is King is, and how that informs everything you're doing, and how people can get involved, even, right?
Yeah, Love is King is it's a small organization based right out of Portland, Oregon. And its mission is really it's really centered around creating safe spaces and wild spaces where all people can feel comfortable and create beautiful experiences in the act of love, inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King's writings, basically. And when I mean love, is that I'm talking about, like, if I'm a leader and I'm in a wild space and I'm leading a group, or if I happen to be hiking by myself, and if I see something that's happened to be, an issue of bigotry, hate, or ignorance or racism, without not making sure that I'm going to be okay, but is the in the act of love, we should be able to stand up for the ones who cannot support themselves
Hmm.
and be there for them in the act of love. That's my brother, that's my sister, and I'm willing to step in and be with that person to make sure that they are okay. And so that's what we need collectively to move forward, especially when we are in the roaming in the outdoors, or even in our urban world. We need that kind of synergy for many folks. It's not just BIPOC; it's a collective of humanity coming together. Which that's what Dr. Martin Luther King preaches. That's what he envisions. Is that respect, that dignity, that inclusion of bringing people together, and it's the same thing in this within the organization of Love is King, and those things that you hear in the urban world, that are the injustices and the bigotry, the hate, and the ignorance, that rolls itself right over into the outdoors. Those same people, and so we need to be able to be resilient in how we step forward for one another, and be there for one another. And then with Love is King, it's also about obtaining and injecting new leaders in a conservation space, bringing more diverse voices to the table, being able to talk about the issues that are happening and be part of that process. And so historically, it's been government slash white collectives of coming together, stakeholders, and talking about many different issues and establishing these rules and regulations and how we regulate. But we need to open that up. And we need to open that up with more diverse voices collectively. We still need to have our white brothers and sisters at that table, but we also need to have different types of black and brown people at that table too, to collectively come together and talk about how we should regulate these outdoor engagements throughout the outdoors of nature, basically, and making sure that we have an indigenous voice at that table, right?
Absolutely,
Being
yeah.
able to speak that, and so it's so Love is King definitely got a lot of work to do. But it exists, and
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and we've been making some really beautiful moves, creating these really amazing BIPOC leaders that are now, I mean, just like Dr. Lisa and Mike Crenshaw, who I mentioned earlier. They have taken the flag and they're speaking and carrying the Love is King mission into their workflow. They're going into spaces and they're speaking and getting hired and coming in and holding these Q&A conversations to becoming keynote speakers, and they are acting that out and talking about the important stuff, how we need to come together and be part of the bigger picture. Because right now, a lot of us, we want to see, we're looking at what's right in front of us, which is kind of ugly, but if we can get past that ugliness, which is that bigotry, hate, and ignorance, which will always be there, but we got to be able to create the kind of vision that steps and pierce through what's right in front of us, right? And we can create the kind of vision, then that puts us on the other side, which helps us find better solutions to deal with that ugliness right in front of us. And that's the kind of visionaries that we need to start creating and helping to and foster these leaders in that space. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things I heard recently was when during the Olympic soccer match, Tyler Adams, the captain, Iranian journalist asked him, he was like, how can you live in a country where you're not treated equally? And his response was awesome. It was just like, well, it's getting better every day. And
That's right.
I love that. I love that. It said, like, we have the power to work, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
And I think there's something also important in what you're saying, too. I think when we're looking at conservation, that from my perspective, white voices have been the only voices for far too long. It's important to get everyone at the table, but I think it's also important to have people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, whoever, get to have their own voices, their own experience, instead of just trying to pop them into the white conservation mold too, right?
That's
and
right.
I think that's something you get across really well in the film as well.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure to show that, and also make sure to show as even visually in a subtle way that how we show up is different, right? How we show up in wild spaces within the conservation space is different. We bring culture, we bring a new thought process. We are wired from our environment. We are a product of our environment. It doesn't matter how vast of our growth as leaders, but where we come from does come out of us as we moving forward. And so it's a beautiful thing to see a grandma's quilt in the environment of the outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing. It's not just one size fit all. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So and when you have different dialogues and different conversations and and different ways of doing things, even the food is just is different, but that's the beauty of having and supporting diversity in the outdoors, and that's what makes us whole as a collective humanity. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah,
I love it. And another really powerful point, I think, in the movie is one of the leaders was talking about ancestors and how, when we go to this land, we're on the land of our ancestors, especially for Indigenous people who were on this land for their whole existence, and then it was taken away, right? But also for Black people, also for white people, there's a long history in this land. It's the land of our ancestors. And what was really powerful to me was when that leader then also said that I'm an ancestor, right? That the things we're doing now are going to affect these children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren that we might not even know,
that's
right?
Totally.
How does that work throughout the film and throughout a new perspective on conservation and land?
I'm an ancestor. Yeah, it's we don't think about that, and again, that's that new thought process that's challenging folks to think differently. That the actions and the things that we do is going to be, hopefully we can establish that domino effect to where our children for the next generation be able to reap and enjoy the work that we're putting in to help supporting and protecting the Oahe Canyonlands or any other land that we're trying to support. It's giving. It's also giving a nod to the past of many different people who have established themselves in the various of different lives that has done the work and paved the road for many to walk down. and we don't do enough of that. Indigenous people do. They're very much always having that reflection and giving that nod to the ancestors and leaning to their ancestors. But yes, when we step into this space, especially in this environmental justice space, and we are going up against the grain here to establish something greater and bigger than ourselves, we become the ancestors of laying ground, laying a new way of moving this movement and path that will help others be able to follow and walk down that path, basically.
And this is why I'm so impressed with your work all the time, Chad, because you're always giving in your work. You're giving people the space for their stories. You're giving space for new people to come into the outdoors. You're giving space for kids to learn. I mean, it's great work that you're doing all the time. What are you working? I know I'm always shocked, but you got another project out. So what are you working on now? What are kind of the new projects, next steps for you to be working on?
Yeah. So I just got through finishing shooting this year a film around BIPOC veterans and bringing an all black veteran team into a conservation space where these veterans are they don't know each other. They come together, and it's a forged, kind of like a hand forged fire of these veterans are forging themselves in this space where they are being forced by nature to do a self reflection of who they are and the issues that they carry, which around like PTSD, TBI. But through this process, connecting with nature, it brings them into the space of awe and the space of wanting to protect as a leader and becoming a conservation advocate for our public lands, freshwater, and indigenous communities. The working title of this film is called The Guardians.
And how can anyone listening or anyone out there, how can they help you in your efforts in general, in your filmmaking, in Love is King, in the Guardians film coming up? How can people get involved if they want to?
Yeah, you can always reach out to me through loveisking.org, and I'm always looking for volunteers and support. A lot of my filming that I do is off the grid, backcountry, and so I'm always looking for many different types of resources that I can be able to tap into to streamline the process. It's so and financial wise, it's in the film and independent film, you're constantly knocking on the door,
right?
Trying to raise money to meet a budget, and so donations helps out greatly. And that's basically done through Love is King. A lot of my film, everything that I do is actually under the umbrella of Love is King.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can donate to the organization, and that will help out greatly. And that will help, me continue to do this kind of work, basically. But yeah.
Great. And one more thing I think we have to talk about. Anyone who's met you in person knows that you're usually not by yourself, or I don't think ever by yourself. You've also got a great companion here in Axe, your service dog. You want to tell us just a little bit about Axe and what it's like experiencing wild places and doing your work with a service animal?
Yeah, Axe is an amazing service dog, and I'm really blessed to have him in my life. It's funny that we're talking about Axe, and he's right here by my
I
feet.
saw his tail, yeah.
Yeah, so he's with me in every wild space journey that I go, and he acts as my rock. He helps me as my compass. He's trained to detect my PTSD, and he has the ability of helping me work through my triggers if they happen to come. And Axe has seen everything from negative 40 below zero weather to crazy storms, and we've been in the thick together. And he's it's an amazing to be able to have a dog that has that he's just full on resilience, and he can take a storm, and he's beautiful. I really appreciate it. Everybody loves Axe,
Yes, they do.
and
Yeah.
and when we're on trips in the backcountry, people, people want to cuddle up with him, but they can't because he's working.
Service dog. Yeah.
Yeah, but he definitely becomes kind of like the mascot of the team when we're out there, and people just really, really love Axe. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Well, unfortunately, I could talk to you for another hour, but we're unfortunately out of time. And I have one last question to ask you that I ask every guest, and I think it's a good one to end on. And it is simply, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is me being a witness to see what we learn is transferred over to someone else where they can be able to pick up and learn from that, and then being able to transfer that over to someone else. Is the education, it's the humanity, it's the love, it's the transformation of being able to give another person that gift and allow them to take and run with that, but also be able to transfer the same over to someone else. That's hope to me, and that tells me that when we establish something that's powerful and great of change, there's going to be someone that's going to pick that up and carry that torch and pass that torch over. That's hope to me. And so, but yeah.
That's beautiful. Love truly is king, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Chad, for being my guest, for being on here. And I hope that everyone sees the new film and can connect with you through Love is King.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for imbibing Open Container, a production of Rockfight LLC. Please take a second to follow our show on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on, and send your emails and feedback to myrockfight@gmail.com. Learn more about Chad Brown and his work in films at chadocreative.com and loveisking.org. Our producers today were David Karstad and Colin True. Art direction provided by Sarah Gensert. I'm Doug Schnitzbahn. Get some. Thanks for listening.